All right, hello everyone. I'm here with my friend Martha, and we're inspired to talk about Jupiter now direct in Gemini and the great significance of Jupiter picking up speed and squaring all of this Pisces energy. As we know, there's a lot of strong evolutionary activity in Pisces, but Jupiter, as it completes its time in Gemini, is activating all of that. So it's just really worth giving some attention to. So, Martha, I want to welcome you. Thank you for joining this conversation with me. I'm going to also introduce a summit that Martha is leading. And I want to say first that I get a lot of summit invitations and I say no to them. I'm very discerning around what I promote and what I direct people towards. I feel a lot of respect in Martha's integrity and the purity of intent with which she brings forward her work. So I just want to invite you to introduce yourself and talk to us a little bit about the summit that you're going to be offering this coming March.
Aw. Thank you. Um, well, I really love and honor and respect your integrity, Ari. So that's part of why I asked you to be part of the summit. Yes. So in a nutshell, let's see, I'm Martha and you're my original astrology teacher. And now I'm going my own ways and doing my own things. And that includes co-hosting the summit with Kaylin Castell, who people may be familiar with. It's called Becoming Superconductors of Love. So actually the purpose of the summit is very relevant, I think, probably to our conversation today. It's going to be held from March 9th to March 30th. And it's meant to be a sacred holding space. So it's not like a typical summit where there's lots of learning, talking, kind of like you hear a talk and you're supposed to be learning from it. This is more of a every talk, which is only 10 talks, one per day. They're meant to be very slow, sacred, like placing a jewel around a sacred circle, in a sense, to create a sacred intentional space for us to choose, to have the opportunity to choose individually and collectively in this eclipse time of March 2025, just before Neptune is entering Aries for the first time, that we get to choose to be whatever we want, right? In any moment. But in this moment, we feel so much potential for us to choose to be love, essentially. And there's lots more I could say. I can give you links to more information about it. But the purpose ultimately of the summit is to be a collective holding space for this opportunity for us to really be the change we want to see. That stereotypical phrase, but it's true. And as I think we're going to talk about today, the astrology of this moment, in particular, this eclipse season in March, and the dance of Neptune and Saturn heading toward Aries, and so many planets crossing from Aries into Pisces, Pisces into Aries is, yes, a potent opportunity for us to really radicalize the reality that we are love on the ultimate level, and that it is a choice to truly embody that and to be that in the world, which is what we need. We all know that we need that. We all want to be that. So that's the purpose of the summit.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's such a deep devotion and desire for me to know what it means to be love. Not in an abstract way, but what is it? What is my role? What is my function? How can I perceive through those lens in my relationships, in my work? So this devotion to ground and spend time reflecting on that process of purpose, um, giving alignment and direction to our life on a higher level of meaning. With all of the strong Pisces energy, as you mentioned, and its movement into Aries, there's a calling for new direction, new movements, new clarity of purpose. So anything that we can do to ground and support our own cultivation is deeply valuable. So we'll post links for all of that in the description below. And also, Martha, you offer sessions, you have your own channel. So I will also post information about your work in the description. Okay. So this is why this topic excites me. And I'm definitely going to be doing more videos on all the nuance because Jupiter's doing so much. Let's just start by giving an overview visually of this transit and this process. So Jupiter is going to be uh, completing its time in Gemini, which it's been in for the past year. And just recently, about a week ago or so, Jupiter began moving direct. So, as always, there's a sort of like turning point energy when a planet moves direct. It's building energy, it's building momentum. There's a clarity and integration quality that comes with that. And it's moving direct to leave Gemini. And in this process, it's squaring all of these powerful points in Pisces. So let's just visually take a look at that, moving it month by month. We're in February right now. Here's Jupiter right there in Gemini. So you can say in April, it reaches a 10-degree orb to its square to the nodes at 27 degrees, and also just begins its square with Saturn, its final square with Saturn of 3. It tightens up on all of that node. It's going to be also squaring, let's go back here in April, it's going to be squaring this Venus as Venus begins to station direct after its long retrograde journey. So that's, everything's involved here. Continues on. So we have, let's just go back a little bit. Before Jupiter enters Cancer, right here, 29 degrees, we see that it's completing Gemini, just as both Saturn and Neptune are entering Aries. So there's a culmination happening where the last Saturn-Jupiter square happens, just as they're both entering cardinal signs. So that can immediately tell us, just without interpreting it, we're shifting the ecosystem. There's a great movement from the mutable journeys, and this culmination of this, year-long Saturn-Jupiter square is happening in a completely new sign with Neptune involved. So there's a lot of strong culmination activity, a lot of energy here that I'm excited to unpack. So we're going to have this conversation. Before I jump into that with you, do you want to share any further thoughts or observations on just the movements of these planets?
Nothing jumping out. I have lots of thoughts, but not about the chart itself.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So then let me just start by asking you a question, Martha. When we tune into this Jupiter and Gemini energy in a square, squares are catalyzing. These are stresses that bring forward growth. How do you see the challenges, right? What's the stress? What's the challenge that you can see arising as this square energy tightens over the next several months?
Yeah. Well, so I was saying before we started recording, one of the things that jumps out at me when you ask that question, I've been seeing this with a lot of clients lately, is this this sort of uncertainty, and I would say even anxiety around feeling like I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going on. Like a lot of feeling like things are nebulous and confusing, and like a lot of people who work with me right now are feeling like they're in this big transitional moment, and they know there's a humongous change coming, maybe a year or something from now, but in this minute they're really really feeling lost. um yeah, so I would say that's the big thing that jumps out at me, and it makes complete sense when we have so much Piscean energy going on, and even the Jupiter squaring that, and yeah.
Right.
But
To add some context to that, if you think of Jupiter and Gemini, Gemini being our map. So whatever's happening in Gemini, we're mapping our world, which implies I know where things go. I can classify my reality, and I have a hold of it. I'm intellectually organizing things, right? Jupiter in Gemini is wanting to expand our vision and our insight and our understanding of the map. So there are new perspectives, new data points, new pieces of information, which ideally, right? It's like, oh, here's a perspective or a road that I never knew this road existed. If you're taking a walk, this happens to me. I'm taking a walk and I find there's like a little like alleyway that I never noticed existed. Like, oh wow, that just changed my whole organization of the world that I'm living in. And you walk that alleyway and there are cats and art pieces and trees, things you've never seen. Your whole world changes. And also how you get from point A to B changes, right? So that alone is a very expansive and exciting, just a curiosity and open-mindedness to learning. And then I think the stress that you're speaking to is Pisces on one level is anarchy.
Mm.
Because if we're, it's anarchy from the point of view of trying to hold and sustain an organization of reality, that Virgo polarity. It can feel like there's total chaos and we don't know how to classify or hold on to or possess in our mind a sense of direction. So when we're talking earlier, the thought that arose is the labyrinth, right? Just the
Mhm.
archetypal nature of the labyrinth. We're walking and we think, oh, I'm getting closer to the middle of the circle. So in our mind, we're thinking, if I keep on walking, I'm going to arrive here. And then suddenly the labyrinth shifts and we're at the perimeter of the circle again. So I think there two thoughts come up for me around this. On the one hand, there can be a significant degree of cognitive dissonance, right? Like I thought I understood, I thought I had a sense of where things are going, and it doesn't seem to work anymore. And it can be really disillusioning because we can give a lot of meaning and hope and value to our idea of this is what's happening in my life or in my relationship or with my body or with my plans. And then to actually see that it's literally tangibly going perhaps seemingly in the opposite direction. So there can be a total cognitive dissonance and a loss of perspective and confusion. And the other thought is, and I'm seeing a lot of this, and I think it's helpful for us to hold this perspective in that sense of, I don't understand, this is confusing. We might feel tempted to actually live in a sort of exaggerated, restless state where then we're grasping for more and more information. Let me get more readings done. Let me pull more cards. Let me look externally for myself because I feel so lost and confused that I need to hold on to some kind of security so I don't feel lost in the state of anarchy and meaninglessness. Would you have anything to elaborate on that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a theme that's again been coming up with a good number of people is in the past few months. I'm trying to feel into whether I feel like this is energetically still quite as true, but I'll just name it anyway in case it resonates for people. When you're talking about the labyrinth, um, something that I've really felt in the process a lot of people are going through right now is actually a need. I've been thinking of it like a shell. So like the need for a lot of people to, in a sense, turn in on themselves. Like instead of go external, go the most internal you can possibly get until you get to the very, 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 very center bing, like the very beginning of that internalized place, like the ultimate conception point of yourself in a sense,
Yeah.
right? The center of that shell. And that's where we restart, which actually maybe is very Piscean. I mean, it can be a lot of other things, but um yeah, because what I've just been feeling like energetically with a lot of people is that there is this sense of restlessness, really big fear around not knowing, like knowing they need to do something different,
Mhm.
but not knowing how the heck they're going to get there. Um, and the instinct, the way we've been trained is to then try to find the answer out there somewhere,
Right.
get a plan, do something very logical, linear. But the process I feel like a lot of us are needing to go through, a lot of people are needing to go through is the opposite, is actually going the inside, go all the way inside. And maybe there's no logic, maybe there's no cognitive thought that we're used to that is really going to be necessarily part of that process. And then when we are able to be held and feel safe to go all the way in and find that being like the very beginning place, then we can begin to unravel and come back out. And I a little bit wonder, I mean, I'm just in this minute feeling into the place we are astrologically. And maybe I would say what's coming to me initially at least is maybe with Jupiter now having gone direct, maybe the energy is ready to come back out a little. I don't know if this is making any sense to your way
No,
of conceiving.
it is. I can see that it's going direct, but I think there's actually a lot of truth in what you're saying prior to that.
Mhm.
Um, because maybe we think Jupiter will intuit. So we intuit, oh, there's a path, there's a journey. You know, the sense of, but I can't rely on what I know can be really strong right now.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying around kind of coming to that 0 point where there isn't information, there isn't perspective. I want to just hold that up for a moment. The issue with Jupiter is when we have too many answers.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
sometimes the last thing that we learned is what hinders us from continuing to discover more. And that needs to be differentiated between a sort of restless, I'm lost and seeking. And so I don't know that I have the capacity for realization, thus I'm going to look for more. That's different than the clarity of mind to let go of what I just learned. There needs to be like integration and a freshness of experience. And that's like the pilgrimage. Jeannie Zandy once shared this beautiful teaching when I was on a retreat with her. She's a spiritual teacher. And she said something like, if you're in the airport and you're buying a ticket to go to Florida, in that moment, you're not going to Florida. You're buying a ticket.
Mm.
And just to expand on that, and this is a funny thought, right? If in the airport you have to walk, and let's say you're in California, you have to walk westward to like the gate is west of where you're standing once you buy the ticket. In a literal sense, you're walking further away than Florida. It's like, but I'm supposed to be going to Florida. Yeah, but the plane's that way. But so that's an obvious kind of silly example because we all know it's like an airport and you got to walk to the gate to get on the airplane.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what our life might be like. And if we're holding on to this, like, I had this spiritual realization and it's clarity of mind, I absolutely know I'm going to Florida and that's why I'm here. Then why should I be walking that way? That can create a lot of confusion because at that point we're trying to control more than we appropriately should be controlling. So it's a silly analogy, but I think it's actually very real in our lives right now.
Well, and it's from, I mean, you have little kids, and I'm thinking of my own younger daughter who's now almost a teenager, but when she was 2, right, she really badly wanted to go to school in the morning, preschool,
Because her
but
older
every
sibling was, yeah.
what'd you say?
That's because her older sibling was?
Yeah, yeah, like, she's
Yeah.
super excited. She really badly wanted to go, but every single morning, it'd be time to go to school, and what would she do? We would get to the car, she would have a complete full meltdown, humongous tantrum because she didn't wanna get in the car, and I was like, "But you have to get in the car to go to the place you wanna go."
So interesting. Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Every day.
I want to relish that. That's so real.
Mhm.
Wow. Because the journey there isn't there. It's here. But the emotionality of that child not wanting to get in the car is so real for us. And also it's like very apt. Like literally a car is a transportation vehicle. And you have to surrender. Like you're not the driver, your mother is.
Mm.
You have to you have to trust the journey is going to take you there. The level of faith and trust and even willingness to be uncomfortable and surrender to a process you have no control over is incredibly vulnerable if you think about it.
Yeah, to get
You have to
strapped.
walk a journey the journey is gonna walk us there. As much as we want to be there, we have to be walked there. We have to be guided. We have to be led there, and that just takes so much trust. And no matter how much we know, I'm going to preschool. Um, you're not in control of getting yourself there. We're not in control of the journey. What humility! Like what a teaching. Mm.
Yeah.
So you're also speaking about in this process a lot of what's I mean, there's so much potency. In particular, Jupiter is going to be squaring the nodes, and you're sharing something really insightful around the Virgo-Pisces axis here. Will you share that with me here?
Yeah, so I don't remember exactly what I was saying before we recorded, but what is arising for me about that right this minute is 2 things, and I'm seeing this a lot in people too, is so now that the nodes are in Virgo and Pisces, and we're gonna be having Jupiter squaring them, right? It's like what comes up for me is, okay, ultimately, what we have an opportunity for is really to be integrating the Virgo Pisces dance to come into the center of the 2. And Jupiter maybe is like an ally in that because it's gonna be squaring them. Um, so with the South node in Virgo, something that's been arising for me a lot is the opportunity perhaps for us to be really releasing some of the shadow side of Virgo energy, which can be, being overly critical or having this self-critical eye that gets in our way or that kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm thinking of people who, again, might be in a time of life where they know where they're going. Like we know we're heading toward that Neptune Saturn conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries. That's a very concrete, like we're going to go to preschool or we're going to go
Right,
to,
right.
like we're going to get there, right?
A new
But
journey's begin.
in,
Yeah.
what'd you say?
Yeah, like a new journey's definitely gonna begin. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. And it's coming. It's coming. Like really it's coming. And we're already on the way. But like in order to get there, okay, what is this time giving us an opportunity to do in order to really arrive by the time we arrive? So one thing I think maybe is we have been conditioned in this lifetime and lots of lifetimes and this whole time of forgetting we've been in for eons. We've been conditioned in various ways, including having a pretty critical gaze on ourselves and critical gaze on lots of things. But lots and lots of us have a not necessarily very helpful, overly critical talking in ourselves, right? So a huge part of what I think I do a lot right now in my work is in all kinds of ways holding space for us to be radically, radically, radically letting that the heck go.
Okay.
And I think that's relevant with the South Node in Virgo, but then also, of course, the North Node in Pisces, because then the North Node in Pisces with Neptune there, blah, 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 um, brings in, for me, of course, radical forgiveness and the opportunity to just let's forgive and let it go. Not And that's different from condoning negative things, right? Condoning, let's say, violence or something. That's not the same as forgiveness. This is a radical forgiving, a radical letting go. And also bring in one thing. I don't know if do you work with Nessus? Ari? Okay. So
I don't know if
Nessus,
she works with me, but I'm not working with her.
okay. So so Melanie Reinhart, talks about
Uh-huh.
the centaur. So Nessus is one of the centaurs along with Chiron, Chariklo, and Pholus, one of the four main centaurs. And I had a conversation a month and a half ago or something with Pam Gregory, which people could look up if they want, where the first half of the conversation was largely about the Nessus Saturn conjunction happening right now, actually, in Pisces. And then there's going to be the North Node Nessus conjunction in Pisces. And so Nessus, on a very basic level, and way more detail in that video, is Melanie Reinhardt talks about it as the buck stops here.
Hmm.
So yeah, so with Saturn, which has to do with boundaries, right? In Pisces, comes together right now with Nessus in Pisces, and then the North Node, etc. It's like extra, extra, extra layers for me of, hey, we've gone through eons of trauma, eons of really difficult stuff, and it's really legitimate that we would feel traumatized, we would have all this conditioning that feels very difficult, etc. And at a certain moment, at a certain time, at a certain point, when it's appropriate, when it's the divine timing, we have the opportunity to make a choice to let it the heck go.
Mhm.
Again, not spiritual bypass,
Mhm.
not condone things that aren't cool. We need to have healthy boundaries in that, but there's a moment where we can let go of being a victim. I think that's really actually what it comes down to for me. And just let's be done. Let's be done. Let's move on, right? Yeah, I'm curious.
What? I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if you know, but how fast is Nessus? Like, how long is it moving along with Saturn in Pisces? Like, what's its movement rate? Is it like Chiron
Nessus,
and very elliptical, or?
it's really slow.
Okay,
Yeah, super, super slow.
cool. Okay, um, here's one thing that this elicits: just contemplating what you're speaking to around letting go of control, and sort of coming into clear alignment in our of discrimination. I think the challenge, given that we're looking at the square and the south node being in Virgo, is that if we really let go and surrender and we stop judging, because the impulse here is going to be, I want to judge and thus label so I can possess and know and feel secure about what's happening. If we don't, we're going to do something wrong. I think that that's a core piece that arises here, because the underlying dynamic within Virgo is a guilt. And so the perfectionism, right, is I need to make the right choices. I need to kind of get the right answer or get the right perspective, know how to think about it. So it's like we sit in our bed thinking about things over and over and over again. Like what we're kind of attempting to do from a Virgo Gemini perspective is we're kind of just trying to organize it properly, and none of our thoughts usually bring us peace. But these are attempts to just like classify our life, and nothing really works until it brings us back to the truth with a capital T, right? But our limited, it's like rearranging the furniture in a room that really just doesn't, it's rearranging dysfunctional furniture. And no matter what we do, the furniture won't really give us what we're needing. We, in a sense, need to let go and free up the space and a whole nother framework. It might be some of that furniture is going to be repurposed. It might be you're going to be in a different room entirely. Maybe you don't even need furniture. Maybe you're going to walk out of that room. You know, like the framework from which we're operating is going to limit us in a very narrow range of possibilities. But I think two things, Jupiter being that, like, I don't want to miss the opportunity. I don't want to miss this opportunity for expansion and growth or development, or miss the spiritual opportunity. And so I'm going to try to force things or control things or organize things to be the outcome, or to be understood in the ways that I need it to be, so that I don't get lost. I think this brings up an existential fear of being lost, because that Pisces North Node, with all that Pisces energy, is if I really don't know, if I really let go, there's going to be anarchy and chaos. Everything's going to fall apart, and there'll be no security. So I think that's a really big growth edge for us right now, because we don't want to feel like we're lacking in depth. And that's where Saturn is so essential here, because Saturn isn't, you're not just letting go into a state of non-alignment. Saturn says we are disciplining and learning how to cultivate a conscious co-creatorship with meaning, with the divine. So this square with Jupiter to this North Node and to the Saturn in Pisces, there's a way of thinking and a developmental path and a discipline that's actually relevant for us right now. And it's not letting go into an anarchistic state. It's letting go into how the path wants to actually lead us. And there's work to do. But I think we need to be willing to let go of that insecurity of, I need to hold it and possess it in the ways that I've organized it. Otherwise, it's like, I'll be wrong, I'll make a mistake, I'll miss an opportunity, or everything's going to fall apart. And so Virgo can do that thing where maybe I'm not following my purpose in life, maybe I'm not following meaning, or maybe I'm not happy, but at least my shoes are organized, you know? Because that creates so at least I've been able to say this is what everything means and how it all works. And that's the delusion of Pisces then as well. Like we flip into the delusion of Pisces, where we're just living in a dream reality and we think that we're letting go. And so we have to really be mindful of that. A well-organized illusion is still an illusion.
It's hilarious. I have an image coming to me if you want me to share it,
Please do,
but
yeah.
I'd be really curious to get your take on this. So, as I think you know, but maybe people listening may or may not know. So I this past year held my own astrology course for the first time, and then I just started round two. And part of what I'm doing in this, my way of approaching astrology, is that I channel each of the planets. So I give kind of like, here's the Ari Moshe Wolfe rundown of astrology. And then I go, and here's
The
Martha
evolutionary
part two,
astrology.
right? So the Martha part two is more of the channeling embodiment way of being with the cosmos. So last month, we were with Capricorn and Saturn, and so I channeled Saturn. Here's what came through when I channeled Saturn. This was fast, totally. It was so healing for me. Okay. So you are one of the people who I agree with that Saturn is a yin planet, yin energy, etc. Okay, right. So I already was on that page, but when I was then channeling Saturn, what we got taken into was becoming Saturn itself. Okay, so Saturn, for people who don't know, is a gas giant. It's massive and it's made of gas. So it is the planet that if you were to place it in a gigantic tub of water, bigger than Saturn, it would float in water because it's so light. It's so not
Oh,
dense.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Mm.
Totally fits that yin quality, right? And then, of course, we know Saturn has those rings. Okay, so when I was channeling Saturn, what came through was to basically imagine that we become Saturn and we get to just relax. It's almost like being in some kind of etheric bathtub or something. But you just get to just like lay back and totally let go, but you let go into the holding of those rings. You don't let go into chaos, right? You let go into Saturn's rings having the perfect spacing.
Do those rings support are they essential for the glass giant sticking together?
That's a great question. I don't think so,
Okay.
but that's a great question. Um, yeah, and so but there are like I could go on tangents. There's for example, there's this one moon of the moons of all the planets are a thing that I'm really into right now too. But one of the moons of Saturn, which is fascinating, is one called Enceladus, and it is actually this is so funny. It uh it has stream jets of water that are continually protruding from its south pole. And then so as it goes around Saturn, it creates one of Saturn's rings by basically like ejecting water constantly.
Whoa.
It's so, it's so awesome. Yeah. So that's a whole topic. But the point is, so I was channeling Saturn and I was getting this, we're basically being held to, be Saturn, but to release, let go fully into being held by those rings. And then Saturn, Saturn pointed out the fractal nature and the parallel reality of its own structure with the structures of atoms,
Mm.
our solar system, right? Like you can think of so many other parts of existence that mirror the structure of Saturn with its rings. And so what it said was oh wow, okay, I'm remembering this. So it itself became like a gong. So it's like if you think of anything in existence, everything has a vibration. So Saturn itself was being sort of like a gong of itself. So it was vibrating its own soul song, you could say. And then it was having us then feel that gong in the vibrational resonance of our own atoms, because it was pointing out that, hey,
Mhm.
atoms are actually structured very similar to me, meaning Saturn.
Mhm.
And it was pointing out that the subatomic particles of an atom, like protons, neutrons, electrons, etc., they are also just like the rings of Saturn in their perfect spacing, right? And so it was saying like if an atom were to collapse, like have no spacing, the atom wouldn't exist. So that's not cool, right? And so there's the sense of with Saturn that if we're able to embody the true yin quality of being held in a soft yet very strong way, then we can remember even on a subatomic particle level that perfect spacing, that perfect being held reality that we are, so that we can be Saturn and Pisces. We can be both like in the ethers, but held. So we're not in just chaos, right? And the anarchy you're talking about.
Right. So that elicits that sense of surrender and trust, but also being composed.
Yes, exactly.
There's like a quality of I'm in alignment and I'm in harmony with the universe. I'm in harmony with my life, with the world around me. There's purpose and there's structure that has meaning,
Yeah.
right? Like it's and that and that's okay. What's arising is this really differentiates to how just speaking about Saturn and Pisces and how culminative this is with Neptune right now, the dissolving of all the structures that we've created that are actually not in harmony. They're not in resonance. They're just illusions of meaning that we've established, and they might like be like really nice looking sandcastles. These can dissolve, and on the other side, there is a structure. There is an order. There is an organization. All these Saturn definition qualities that resonates with a greater plan and a greater ordering that we didn't actually invent. So I just love that imagery of when you're speaking, just imagine lying in a bathtub, surrendering to this greater field of letting go, but knowing that within that there's purpose and there's alignment, and that we are the word compose. I've never thought of that before in my life until just now. Being composed makes
Wow.
sense because compose is you're putting it together.
Mm.
But if you're composing a song, there's also a harmony to it, and it
Yeah.
resonates. So that's a really cool teaching, Martha. Thank you.
Mm.
So let me see my notes here if there's anything else that I wanted to explore with you. Are there any other thoughts that you have in just really exploring this Jupiter moving to square all of this Pisces energy? I mean, one thought, I'm actually curious to hear you speak a little more about what it means for you that all of this is happening just before Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter enter into cardinal signs. So that's one thing that we can talk about.
Totally. Yeah. Um,
And while you're talking, I'm going to share the screen just to kind of give that visual again.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I would love to hear your thoughts also. The big, big, big thing that's being gonged through my being as you're talking is I'm getting told, don't forget to say more about or hold more space for this radical forgiving. That feels so key to the North Node in Pisces, conjunct Neptune, conjunct, all of the things. Um, that it's like as Neptune reaches its very last degree in Pisces, and then Saturn is following. And then they're going to be going back. They're both going retrograde back into Pisces this year. So they both enter Aries this year, but then they both go back into Pisces this year, as we know, right? And then it's not until 2026, early 2026, when they both finally really, really, really do enter Aries, and then they conjunct exact on February 20th, 2026 at 0 degrees of Aries. Okay. So, and your talk in my summit is all about that. So
Yeah,
people,
yeah.
yeah, go to the summit to hear more of Ari talk about that too. But yeah, so what comes up for me is like, okay, if we're playing so much this year with this very, very, very end of Pisces, and just the feeling I get in my body when I feel that is, it's like that place in the zodiac to me holds the memory, even the cellular memory of what is ultimate divine love, really, right? So, like, as we are doing this letting go this year, this highly mutable time, which is for me really so much about letting go and being willing to be put in the car in order to go to preschool. It's like, well, um, something that keeps arising for me is, hey, it's okay. We are always held in this, what is 29 degrees, 59 minutes of
Mm,
Pisces.
mm,
Literally, I would say that's like the beginning and ending of time in a sense, right? So it is divine love. And part of that forgiving for me is, I think right now, we've had this Pluto-Mars opposition. We're going to be having a third Pluto-Mars opposition in April, and there's lots of very volatile energy. So, what I've been feeling in my own life and in the world, of course, is the potential for us to be very intense and very angry and very upset for legitimate reasons, totally justifiable, not denying any of that. But there's something where I feel like there are certain times where, okay, something is just truly upsetting. Like, I'm not going to not be upset about certain things. Okay. But especially I think maybe in our personal lives and personal relationships, um, it's like, do I really want to hang on to XYZ hurt? Or what happens if I remember that I'm held in ultimate divine love? I would say sometimes if I'm in that place, my answer is, okay, I do need a certain boundary here. Like love says to me, you need a boundary. But a heck of a lot of the time, if I really am sitting in that place, ultimate divine love would say to me, I want to be in ultimate divine love with you or with, whoever. So then there can be a softening and coming back to our wholeness, coming back to our oneness within ourself, and then with each other. Um, and then there's a discerning of sometimes that's true, and sometimes we do need the boundaries, or maybe there's a both and, you know. But yeah, that's the big
So
kind
are
of.
you speaking of this in terms of just the energetic transition from the mutable to the cardinal, in the sense of that letting go and dissolving, but then also the sort of the claiming of definition and purpose and individuation? Is that where this comes from?
Probably all of the above. There's something about, I think, okay, this is just coming to me just in this second. You tell me what you think. The while we're starting this the mutable energies being so strong, the other thing that's been unbelievably strong is the Mars Pluto opposition, right? Among other things. But that was like we had the exact second of those oppositions on January 3rd. And I can just say for myself, that was a really intense time. Really intense. When it got really intense in the world and all kinds of things. Okay. So, well, Mars is the ruler of Aries, and Aries is where we're going to be at preschool, right? Like
Mhm.
that's where that Saturn Neptune conjunction is going to be happening. 0 degrees of Aries, ruled by Mars, who's just having this very powerful dance with Pluto. So,
Finishing this very powerful initiation, yeah.
exactly. So, maybe part of the opportunity in that is, hey, there's wisdom. There's, as we feel maybe intensity or anger coming up, power dynamics coming up, whatever that Pluto Mars thing has been for us and will continue to maybe be for us, there's probably a wisdom there that's a wisdom in the anger, a wisdom in the need for change, a wisdom in it, whatever it is. Um, but ultimately, hopefully, we can also remember that we are held by divine love. So we don't stay in a what I would call like a damaging version of anger. We can come be held by love so that we can um, be true to the wisdom of the anger, but then ultimately melt back into divine love
Mhm. Yeah.
right before we get to this conjunction and we are finally at preschool. Does that make sense?
That's beautiful. I mean, I think that's such a big principle with this merging of Pisces and Aries energies, and also Neptune entering Aries, because there's a calling, there's a spiritual activism, right? And in our lives, there's a sense of we are here to act and play a role, and that might mean learning how to be more fiery.
Yeah.
And I think the core difference that I'm hearing in what you're saying is, in the way that I frame it, the difference between being attached to outcome versus a sort of emptiness in our actions. We have to play our role, which might mean embodying certain fiery qualities. But when we're doing it, knowing that we're an instrument, we can engage, but then we're not holding on to it. We're not
Yeah.
living in anger. We're not living in attachment. We can just play our role and understand that it's simply us moving forward along this soul journey, doing what we're here to do, where we're each bringing forward our inspiration and our purpose and our agency to be a part of the greater plan of oneness returning home
Yeah.
to itself. And that's very different than picking up this identity of, okay, my purpose is to fight this battle. And then we become very invested in outcome. And then we lose a lot of peace. And this is just sort of, I think, coming back to Gemini, how do we make sense of all the things that are quote unquote wrong, personally, collectively? I think a thing to really be mindful of is where we can get exhausted or sort of lost in trying to strategize or give meaning or place a sense of purpose to our lives according to our own limited thinking. We don't want to exhaust ourselves or enter into a state of martyrdom or depletion or confusion. There is a role. There is learning and reshaping and new perspective that wants to emerge for us, but it's not meant to take us away from our soul,
Yeah.
even if it means exploring new parts of ourselves that we've never explored. I shared this in a recent interview, just how this movement from the Pisces to the Aries energy can sort of be like the monk um, leaving the monastery and starting to work out in the gym, right? Just like what can otherwise feel very mundane, we want to animate more of this human life and allow ourselves to be available for new experience without judging it.
Yeah.
So another thought arose while you were speaking, and just so everyone can notice here, again, highlighting how profound this is. Like Saturn enters Aries, and that square is culminating during Gemini season, Sun in Gemini. The last part of this square is Jupiter's in Gemini, but it's squaring this cardinal turning point and then enters right into Cancer
Yeah.
with a new phase with Mercury too, which is also a really cool yearly cycle. So there's just a lot of really interesting new energy. We're going to be learning so much more about ourselves and who we are. So the final perspective I wanted to bring forward is this: deception. Jupiter in Gemini, news, media, information, squaring Pisces, the illusion of appearances, Saturn in Pisces, authority figures taking on roles of deception. We're
Mm.
seeing this now. In my personal opinion, I don't shy away from humbly sharing my own personal perception, even though I'm sure many of us have different views, and that's fine. I believe there is a pretty massive deception happening right now with the powers that be in the government in the United States right now. Um, on a very deep level, I liken it to in Star Wars how Palpatine was the beloved emperor, but no one knew that Palpatine was a Darth Lord, Sith, right? Sith Lord. And this is just my own perception that I bring forward here. And I'm not trying to be partisan either. I'm not saying anything about any other politicians. I'm just stating what I'm seeing. And I think that's very much reflected in that appearances and words and ideas can be expressed and articulated that can easily bypass the logical or intuitive mind and to convey certain ideas and be convincing of that which it's wanting to convince, but be very mindful of the power of deception whenever we're dealing with Pisces and the duplicit nature of Gemini and the sort of salesperson quality of Jupiter. Something to be really mindful of, both in terms of our own ability to self-convince and deceive ourselves and to also be misled. I think this calls for a lot of spiritual discernment and discrimination, and to notice, are we adopting beliefs and ideas that resonate with a sense of separation? Are we, anything can be logically argued to be true, and that's like a Gemini thing. And especially if you bring in Pisces and Jupiter, anything insane can be logically argued to be true. Like insanity can be logical. Logic doesn't mean truth. And so I think the test is, are we happy? Does this bring joy? Is this bringing closeness? How is it affecting those around us? Or are we living in a bubble of separation? That's one way to test the logical premises that maybe we think are real, but does it actually restore a sense of connection and unity and peace in ourselves and the world around us? That's like a bottom line way of thinking of it. Do you have anything to add to that?
I have a question, if that's
Yeah.
okay. I would just be really curious to hear. So we're talking a lot about Virgo, Pisces, and Gemini, but then the missing fourth thing would be Sagittarius, right?
Okay.
So I'm just curious because you're a highly, highly Sagittarian being, and I have a lot of Sagittarius too, but you really, really do. Yeah, how do you feel that all this whole T square in relation to the
Well, let's share the
Sagittarius?
screen again because you can think of when you have a strong T square in a chart, transit or natal chart, um, there's sort of a release point. And this is just, this is not a technique. This is me being intuitive. And I invite everyone to think in this way. Happens to be in this chart. Let's get that moon out of there. Okay, there we go. So we have a very strong Virgo and Gemini, Pisces, configuration. Let's get Jupiter even a little more into it. So besides for the occasional movement of the moon, nothing's happening in Sag. What that means is the Sag holds this empty space for where a lot of integration can happen. It's not like we need to become Sag or pretend there's a planet in there. It's just this holds the key for balance, because we have this T-square where there's a crux and a crisis between these energetics, right? Jupiter at this midpoint between Virgo and Pisces means there can be a lot of alternating between the Virgo and Pisces consciousness, with this sort of dissonance and confusion of what am I doing with that Jupiter in Gemini. The Sagittarius polarity becomes, you can think of it as either a trigger for integration or a release point. The question that I would pose, and this is again a framework for any time we have a T-square, how does that empty space that would then create the cardinal, the mutable cross, how does that empty space offer a teaching and a point of wisdom to bring balance and further integration to where there can be an otherwise strong polarization between extremes? So in this case, it's your intuition. We can get lost in our mind, in a lot of thinking, in a lot of creating logical conclusions and trying to control things and believing in ideas and convincing ourselves of what's true and trying to map the world according to what we want it to be. And so we're in the labyrinth, and here's a funny analogy. We're on the labyrinth. Either one, we've told ourselves, I'm gonna get there. Oh, I'm not there. All right, I'm lost. I'm confused. Let me get out of the lab. Right, so we end the journey, or we get confused about the journey because we didn't arrive where we thought we were going to arrive. I'm supposed to be flying east, but I'm walking west right now. I shouldn't be here, right? Or we're on the labyrinth, and suddenly it seems like we're further than we wanted to be. We're not in the center. Someone comes along and says, "You're doing it all wrong. You're doing this labyrinth, but this labyrinth is just an old way of thinking. You can just go straight to the center. You know how? Pick up those rocks and just walk." Like, oh my God, I can just take a shortcut. We're bypassing an intuitive knowing that says the journey is the journey. You can pretend and make up your own and pretend you're on some other path. The journey is the journey. Like there's no book or movie that represents that archetypal hero's journey, where it's like in the beginning of the movie, Frodo is like, you know what? I don't need the ring. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna walk this path. It's all an illusion anyway. Like you just can't exempt yourself from the path, and you're not, if you just jump to the middle of the circles, you pick up a rock, whatever, you're not gonna learn anything. The appearance of arrival, which is also like a sort of you can pretend or make yourself look like you've arrived, is not the same thing as actual arrival. So you just have to access your intuition. What does that mean with Sag? Which is more challenging here because Gemini is, Jupiter is in Gemini ruling that Sag. We have to be really honest with ourselves. The energy of honesty, the energy of sincerity. Do I actually know? So besides for the gauge of does it bring peace and happiness for myself and others, is it nurturing a sense of unity? Also, I would say, do I need to repeat beliefs and ideas and logical arguments in order to prove and sustain my knowing? Or does the knowing rest on its own? If it rests on its own, we're in touch with our intuition, which also means we have nothing to prove, nothing to defend, nothing to prove, nothing to convince ourselves or others of. What's known is self-evident because it's known. And what isn't known, because it's not actually self-evident, it needs to be sustained with a lot of logic and arguments and whatnot. So yeah, really learning how to be honest with ourselves, to know the flavor and the taste of honesty. Even if the honesty is like, I really thought I was supposed to be here, but when I look into this moment, I'm actually here, and this is what I know, and I only know what I know, so I guess that's the truth. And that might bring up a lot of questions, but the truth is the truth, and that's the only place where we start. So it's a great question, and that's my thought on that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Again, I can direct people to the video I did with Pam Gregory, because I'm realizing I give it another answer that I think adds on to your answer really, really, really perfectly. Because in that video, I talked about 3 Well, two asteroids and one Kuiper belt being, Varda, Diana, and Estrella, who are
Okay.
all conjunct the galactic center. So, in the end degrees of Sagittarius, and Varda moves very, very, very slowly, so she's kind of there for a long time. But the two asteroids, Diana and Estrella, this year are going retrograde, so they're going crossing back and forth over that galactic center point, squaring the nodes, especially at the time of the eclipses.
Mm.
Um, Actually, both eclipse seasons this year. And so I add in, who is Diana, who is Estrella, who is Varda. But I just say, just that goes so perfectly with what you're saying. Diana, on among other things, to me helps us come back to our body wisdom, right? And so Diana in Sagittarius with the galactic center, squaring, creating that fourth point of that cross we're just talking about. I think it just throws in yet another like flavor of, yeah, we need to we're being held and supported to really know our intuitive truth, the being that is us as a body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Nice. All right, Martha. Thank you for sharing this really enriching conversation with me on these transits. Once again, check out the description below for more on Martha's work and the upcoming Becoming Superconductors of Love. As Martha mentioned, she interviewed me. I gave a talk on the Saturn Neptune conjunction, going deeply into its movement into Neptune. I don't remember the talk. I don't have a good memory. I just remember feeling really good about it. It was like a really energizing and just engaging conversation. Announcement, as always, my training program is now open for enrollment. My 2025 first year training program. Martha actually took this with me, I think, during the first year that I ever did it. We are now moving into our 5th year.
What?
So yeah, I know,
Cool.
right? So I'm very excited about this year. It gets stronger, more solid, and my teaching kind of strengthens every year and my own growth as well. So I'm grateful for this opportunity. Learn more in the
Dedication.
description. We have part 1, all of the basics, part 2, chart interpretation. You can take the full program or just part 1. This includes video, curriculum, workbook, transcription, assignments, weekly live meetings, many additional practice groups, including alumni, and the option for weekly practice classes with smaller groups with just myself. So it's a very enriching ecosystem, an opportunity to study astrology from a soul perspective, whether you're new to astrology in its entirety or already practiced but want to start from the very beginning, beginner's mind, studying this evolutionary astrology work. It's based in the lineage of Jeffrey Wolf Green, which I am trained in. So as always, you can also reach out if you want to talk more or have any questions about it.
And I can just say, yes, it ignited my own soul to be part of it with you. So give that plug.
You just froze.
Oh, did I freeze?
You just froze. Say that again. Give the plug
Oh, so I
froze.
said,
Unfreeze it. Yeah.
yeah. I said, yeah, I just want to say that when I was part of it with you, and I also studied with you before that even, that it was you who literally ignited my own being in my relationship with astrology. It was like, I've said this to you so many times, it was like something about you and your soul just, it like went like a drill, like straight into my own heart, my own soul, and it went doop. And then it was like I got ignited, and my whole life, I will never forget. I was driving many years ago now. I was driving in Santa Cruz, and I was listening to Ari Moshe Wolfe in one of your classes talking about cancer, the sign of cancer, and I just started sobbing the whole drive through Santa Cruz. It's like I could not stop crying because it was so something my soul needed. It was like soul medicine, soul food for me. Um, so yeah, thank you yet again for that.
Thank you for the plug and for the feedback.
Mhm.
All right, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching, and till next time.